Thank you. I would like to call to order the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 meeting of the Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Citizens Advisory Committee. And we welcome all of our viewers and staff of our Creeks Division. And we look forward to hearing some interesting things this evening. So I'd first like to ask for a roll call vote, please, or not vote, roll call for attendance purposes. And Ms. Hollywood.
Thank you. Okay, so Chair Gaskin?
Present.
Ms. Weber?
Present.
Ms. Owens?
Present.
Ms. Silva?
Present.
Ms. Rizzo Santino? And Mr. Moldaver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we have a quorum, so we will move forward. The next item is approval of our minutes from our April 21, 2021 meeting. And those minutes are attached to the agenda. So is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. And I think that was Penny seconding. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So
That
we
was
have
Sophia.
Sophia, I apologize. I'm sorry. The voice recognition is not good. Okay, for me. All right. Any questions? Any comments on the agenda or on the minutes? Hearing none. Do we need a roll call vote, Ms. Hollywood, on this?
Yes, we will go ahead and vote. So we have Ms. Gaskin,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Ms. Owens,
Aye.
and Ms. Silva.
Aye.
So we approve those minutes with a 4-0 voice vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn to George Johnson, who is staffing this meeting with us. Are there any agenda adjustments for this agenda?
No agenda adjustments.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Item number 5, do we have any public comments?
Chair Gaskin, we have, let's see. I just want to recognize that we have one of our liaisons, Kristen Snedden, is here, our Mayor Pro Tem. And other than that, we do not have any members of the public currently.
Thank you, and welcome to our liaison, City Council liaison, Snedden. So thank you very much for calling our attention to that. Okay, and no public comments. We'll move on to item number 6. I'll start first asking if our committee members have any comments that anyone would like to make. From any of our committee members? Okay, hearing none. Staff, George, I'll turn to you. Are there any staff comments, communication that we need to be aware of before we move on to the business item?
I'm just going to give you a couple updates about what's going on. So with the Creeks Division. So first off, I am currently acting as the acting manager of the Creeks Division. In case anybody doesn't know, Cameron is the he's the acting co-director of the sustainability department right now. So I'm going to do this for the next 5 months, just so everybody knows. And it's a temporary position. And then I wanted to update people on the Arroyo Burro open space construction has started. So it's right in the same zone as the bike path on Las Positas construction. If anybody's seen all that, obviously, I'm sure most of us have. But it's more in the park itself, the open space park, but we have started construction. And I just wanted to let everybody know that. We'll probably do a site visit with the committee next month at that location so that everyone can see the construction, what's going on, and get out to the site and take a look. We're also still working on the Bonet water quality project. It's a combination improvement of Bonet Park as well as a water quality project. That is still under construction, but it's getting closer to getting finished. Hopefully we can have a site visit there maybe in August when it's all done, but we'll see about that. But I just wanted to give you an update on that. It is getting close to being finished. One last thing is I wanted to let everyone know that Liz Smith has finished our new PSAs. They're kind of a TikTok format, so they're kind of fun. And we got some nice music with them. They are on youtube.com/SB Creeks Division if you want to see them on YouTube online. And then they'll probably be airing on TV next week. All right. So that is all the updates I have. And if you want me to, I can introduce Jill, Lori, for the next item, or?
Let me just make a couple of comments. First, we are
Okay.
delighted, George, that you're serving as the acting manager. We respect and regard your competence and your knowledge, and we enjoy working with you. So we're looking forward to the next 5 months as well. And
Cool.
thank you for your service in that regard. And just recognizing how much you do in terms of the Creeks Division, and knowing all the work that you are engaged in right now relative to Arroyo Burro and Bonet. I mean, just everything. And also the outreach that Liz does. So this is all very exciting. And I'm looking forward to viewing those TikTok videos on YouTube as soon as we conclude this meeting. So thank you very, very much. Let me just announce the business item, and then I will ask you to introduce Jill.
Okay.
So we have one item for business, and it is Water Quality Research and Monitoring Program update and proposed fiscal year 2022 Research and Monitoring Plan. And I will turn it over to George to do the introductions of our presenter. Thank you.
All right. So today, Jill Murray is going to talk to you guys. She's our water quality research coordinator. She's been doing this job a long time. She knows a lot about water quality, and she will be able to explain all that we're planning on doing over the next year and some of what we did last year. And so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, George, and hello to the committee. It's good to see you again. Let's see, let's get started here. Okay, this is a little outline about how I'll proceed. I'll first go over what we're proposing for the FY22 research plan. I'll go over our purpose, goals, and what we want to focus on during FY22. Then I'll give you a little bit of results from our FY21 sampling, focusing on some of our bird refuge results and Laguna Channel storm monitoring. And I'll finish with next steps and then request your recommendation for approving the research plan. Okay, so for our overall water quality research and monitoring program, we always complete what we need to do, what's required for our grants and permits. After a few years of doing mostly just monitoring, we started adding in more targeted research projects. And every year we change our sampling plans a little bit as we become aware of new pollutants, for example, or wrap up, answer a question, or take on new projects that we want to assess. And we come to the committee every year with our sampling plan and research plan and ask for you to approve it and then carry out the work over the next year. And we always take input from, we'll listen to input from everyone, and we really value input from other city staff, scientific community, whether that's by reading literature or attending conferences, partnerships. The water board weighs in, and we've had some really great suggestions from CAC members over the years, and we've had people call directly and ask if we're testing for things and request that we add them if we're not. And so I encourage everyone to look at what we do. And if you hear about something that you think we should be doing, feel free to reach out via email or phone or via public comment at one of these meetings. But in general, we adjust things fairly minorly year to year because we have a lot going on, and most of what we're working on takes more than 1 year to complete. For the FY22 research plan, we're really thinking about the fact that this is the 20-year anniversary of the Creeks Division, and we've learned a lot via our sampling, and we still have a lot more to learn. We've spent a lot of years looking at the role of stormwater treatment, BMPs, and testing those. And we see now that the overall stormwater community is moving much more towards infiltration and source reduction, learning that the treatment of storm flow is really, really hard to do and very hard to measure water quality improvement in. And we're also aware that we now are looking at some interdisciplinary issues, most importantly, sea level rise. So I was on the city's interdepartmental committee on sea level rise. So looking at the understanding of the river discharge and high coastal storms and high tides, the interaction of those two in what we call the backwater of the estuary or creek really isn't very well understood at this point. And the potential for increased flooding or increased rain rates and changing our sea level rise models isn't well understood. And the interaction of shallow groundwater and infiltration in sea level rise and adapting to sea level rise is really not well understood, but is thought of as a major part of our adaptation strategy. So we need to be in paying attention to sea level rise and becoming involved in that. And also, as we've learned, the role of drought seems to be just ongoing, and we need to focus not just on water quality, but on water quantity more and more, as that seems to be really pervasive. There's also been a lot of advances in equipment over the last 10, 20 years, and the automated equipment is getting a lot more affordable and more dependable. And we have learned that we want to use more of that. So we really want to come forward with a more updated, contemporary, forward-looking plan and forward-looking plan for the coming year. And what we've come up with this year will really set us up to change again pretty substantially in years to come, because as I'll explain, once we build more of our tools, we'll then be able to ask some different questions more formally. Okay, so now giving you some background on the research plan itself. This is what we have identified as the research plan purpose. And again, we are open to feedback. Mainly, we're using our monitoring and research to inform our prioritization of water quality improvement projects and programs. That's the bottom line. We're not just we're not doing an academic exercise. We really want to know what we can learn that can help us decide which projects and programs and outreach works best. We want to understand changes in water quality over time. It's the most consistent question we get from the public and from some regulators. We always want to be able to communicate effectively with the public about water quality, especially as it affects recreational opportunities. And as I alluded to, we want to understand the role of climate change and sea level rise in altering creek conditions as we move forward. So that's kind of our driving force, and then our specific goals are the following, and there'll be 2 slides here. So we're always trying to assess the impacts of chemical and microbial pollutants, and it's several steps. First, we are identifying which compounds and pathogens to be concerned about. Then we are measuring them in the environment, and that can involve just measuring concentration or adding into the concentration the flow of the water flow rate. So then we get a total load of discharge. That's especially important when we're talking about what the creeks are discharging to the ocean. We are then evaluating how those levels interact with what we call beneficial uses. So that could be recreation, that could be aquatic habitat, that could be spawning fish habitat, the thresholds or the criteria for different pollutants depend on which beneficial uses we are talking about. And then once we find we really have a problem, we know what the compounds are, we know what the levels are, we know that they're problematic for either humans or aquatic organisms. We then want to figure out how the pollutant is getting into the creeks and storm drains, and we call that source tracking. So that's a big part of our research plan. We always want to evaluate our Creeks Division projects, and that includes collecting baseline data for future projects. We've been working on the bird refuge for a long time, and we have a great baseline, and I'm really excited to see what happens with after the project is put in, what we can see. We want to implement hydrologic models of creek flow because we are going to want to understand more about alterations in flow due to climate change. And so we'd like to do some more gauging of stream flow so that we can then get that into models. We want to evaluate the role of infiltration and groundwater movement on creek water quality and quantity, including this intersection with sea level rise. So as the stormwater community has moved more towards infiltration, we know that there's so much that still needs to be researched and learned, both locally and nationally and worldwide. We really don't have a great picture of what happens in our shallow groundwater. How long does it, how far from the creek can you be to where infiltration, you could measure the flow of that infiltration to the creek in what period of time and how much water quality improvement is achieved. That is largely unknown, and we want to contribute to the development of that knowledge. And then where feasible, evaluate the effectiveness of city programs such as street sweeping and outreach in reducing pollutants, source reduction. We do that where we can. Next slide here. We are always, it's a driving purpose, but it's also a specific goal, evaluating long-term trends in water quality and quantity. And then, as I mentioned, we want to meet our requirements for any grants we have, meet all of our general permit monitoring requirements. And then we also investigate what the Water Board calls, and it's based on the Clean Water Act, 303D listed water body impairments. So those are all of the creeks and reaches and some beaches where the state and regional water boards have determined that there is enough of an impairment for certain beneficial uses and certain pollutants to potentially require a lot of regulatory action. The shorthand for that is TMDL, total maximum daily load. We try to be really proactive in looking at which water bodies are listed and what we can understand about the impairments before the water board comes knocking. And then we also want to keep our research plan very contemporary, keep abreast of changes in equipment and computing, statistical applications, and data management methods. So for FY22, we're changing it a bit because rather than just expand our sampling table that includes all of our sites and parameters and frequencies, we're actually trying to scale that monitoring back a little bit and then add a couple of other big projects. So the monitoring that we are going to continue doing this year is our general permit monitoring. So we do outfall testing, all of the outfalls that flow during dry weather, we need to test for a suite of pollutants that the water board dictates, trying to look for any kinds of contamination or illicit connections. For our permit, we also conduct sampling based on an older list of 303D impairments. That's expanded, and probably in the next permit, we're going to have to add some more sampling there. And then we also have what the water board calls special studies. And for us, that is quantifying how much load reduction we get from our water quality projects, mostly our infiltration permeable paver projects. Okay, and then we'll also keep up with any of our long-term monitoring. We have, in we have several sites in addition to the 303D sampling where we have, you know, many years of sampling for indicator bacteria and turbidity, and we'll keep doing that. And then we'll keep going with any of our project assessment. We don't want to break the time series for that. So we have our sampling at the bird refuge, Arroyo Burrow Open Space, Barger Canyon, and our bioretention planters that are the cities. Okay, another big area that we want to focus on is following up on some results we've received in the Laguna watershed. So over the last 15 years, we've done a lot of work in the Laguna watershed. We did a big project with UCSB and Geosyntec, and then a second project also with UCSB, looking for places where sewage was leaking into storm drains, and all of those places were fixed right away. And we really did, we tried to cover the entire watershed, and so we think we identified any large leaks at the time. Then several years later, we said we need to keep going, doing just DNA-based surveillance of all of our creeks so that if new leaks were to occur, we would be able to identify them. And so we've done that with UCSB in the last few years, a small contract every year. And the one place that gets more frequent hits of any signs of human waste is Laguna Channel. And that's all dry weather sampling. And then, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about this later, but in our FY21 storm monitoring, we did some chemical tests that show that we found some chemicals of concern in our stormwater and Laguna Channel that warrant further investigation. So this coming year, we want to develop a sampling plan, and we've done so much of the legwork already in understanding the storm drain system in our prior studies. So it's nowhere near as overwhelming as it would have been if we were starting from scratch. But we want to develop a sampling plan for the storm drains and shallow groundwater to look for sources of any potential wastewater contamination, and see if we can learn really how it's getting into Laguna Channel. And we'll do most of that using chemical testing because it's now more affordable and more accessible to us using outsourced labs. And we will continue to work with with UCSB and do some limited DNA-based tests. If we learn we need to do more, we can address that for the next year. But this will take quite a bit of work for us because the storm drain sampling is really, really labor intensive, and we'll probably have to hire some traffic control to help with that. And then the last area is this push to what I kind of think of as wiring the creeks, getting more automated equipment installed. So for our previous work here, we have picked up the use of these automated loggers. And so these are pieces of equipment that we can leave out in creeks or the bird refuge, and they can log a value for dissolved oxygen or depth every 10 minutes. They can stay out for months at a time, depending on how often the data is logged, and they have a battery, and we try to make their installations as vandal-proof as possible. Those are some pretty simple loggers. We also have multi-parameter sondes that we keep in the bird refuge and the bird refuge lagoon. And those are more advanced. We can get simultaneous measurements of temperature, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, pH. We've added chlorophyll for looking at algal blooms. We've used some auto samplers for storm monitoring. We don't have any way to protect them from vandals, so we generally have to babysit them during the storms. We've done a lot with database development to help manage these extensive data sets that come off of these pieces of equipment. We still have more to do there. And then a huge advance for all of science is this new open source statistical computing and visualizing program called R, where I used to have to spend a fair amount of money on a really buggy program to do advanced statistics. It's now free, and the graphing capabilities are so far surpassed that you can just really learn more about your data by using this program. So the main benefit that we have from all of this is that we have a far more complete picture of water quality and changes to water quality over time and space compared to what we used to get from sampling some of these locations once a week. And I'll show you some of the data, and I think you'll understand what I mean. There's also challenges, especially we have some of the biggest challenges are vandalism. We have lost a couple of smaller pieces of equipment, and the equipment breaks. It takes a lot of effort to keep the entire set of equipment operating, and we have to send things in to get repaired. Sometimes we need to do a better job with getting backup equipment. And then like in the bird refuge, the sensors get covered really quickly. So we have to get out there every couple of weeks and clean them and download data. But I would say the benefits we have learned far outweigh the challenges. So this year we want to identify the priority locations for being able to measure flow and water quality on our creeks. Right now, we rely on a couple of USGS gauges, and we really need we need better spatial coverage. And we can put in these they're called level loggers. They just measure the flow. They measure the depth of the flow, and then we convert that to a flow rate. And so it's a really affordable way to do it. And then we need to identify where we want water quality loggers and what parameters. Every time I think about buying more equipment and I look it up, there are more and more parameters that can be measured. And we just got notification that we have some more creeks being listed on a 303D list for dissolved oxygen. And so we really need to do a better job measuring nutrients, and that's something where it's really hard to learn much when you're just doing the spot measurements. And now there's several nutrients that we can put a probe out for and get the continuous logging. So we need to then research and purchase equipment with what we can afford this coming year, and then install the vandal resistant permanent equipment. So that would be for the data loggers, and then boxes or housing for auto samplers, and develop a management plan. And we'll get as much of this done as we can this year, and then we'll let you know what we have planned for next year on that. Okay, now I'm going to move into just showing some results. This is going to be really short. This is an example of what we're trying to learn at the bird refuge. So we have these automated loggers, they're called sondes, deployed. We had them in 3 locations, out in the open lake, and then near the outlet, and in the lagoon. And they measure for temperature, conductivity, pH, dissolved oxygen, and then more recently we've added chlorophyll A. I'm not going to show those results. And we have them logging every 10 to 30 minutes and leave them out for about 3 weeks at a time. And what I'm going to show you is that Transect 1 and Transect 2 are really similar. So because of some equipment challenges, we then finished the year with just Transect 2 and the lagoon. So I'm going to show you about 4 slides, and on all of them, you're going to see 4 graphs. And this one is temperature. And so this isn't a traditional axis, but this is what will be represented on the y-axis. So this is temperature, degrees C, ranging from about 23 to 30 degrees, which is really warm. And this panel is going to be salinity in practical salinity units, which, if you think about ocean salinity, it's almost interchangeable with what you think of as parts per thousand. And so on all of those, like 34 would be a typical ocean salinity. And then in the bottom, we have dissolved oxygen expressed as % saturation and milligrams per liter. I'm not going to go into the details on those two, the difference between those two right now. So on this one, I wanted to point out this is a summer installation or summer deployment, and you can see evidence for a bloom and decay. So I'll go through the panels here. So this is temperature at all three sites. Red is the lagoon, green is transect 1 in the open lake, and blue is transect 2 that's by the outlet. And you can see they track each other really well, and that you get that. So that's the daily temperature variation over about 3 weeks. And then for salinity, you can see that in the lagoon in the red, starting off pretty high, and then it's just gradually getting slightly more brackish over time. And I think it's getting slow seepage of water from the lake side. Well, I'll call the lake side, the bird refuge side, and where it's typically around about 5 to 8 PSU. And that's pretty stable in there. These excursions are probably not meaningful. They're probably the sensor hitting the bottom. And then when we look at dissolved oxygen, we can see that in this case in the lagoon, it's quite a bit higher than in the lake. During the beginning of this deployment, the lake is really 0. There's no DO. Then we're going to start getting a somewhat of a bloom in the lake where we're starting to get some oxygen production, and then it crashes back down, and then both in the lagoon and in the lake we've got no DO. And that's one of the main things we've learned from these deployments is how long any fish in there could potentially be exposed to low to no DO. Okay, here's another example. And here it's in the winter, so the temperatures are quite a bit lower. And here we only have transect 2 at the outlet in blue and the lagoon in red. Temperature, again, see the daily variation, but it's not as even as it was in the summer. We've got a cold spell there. And then what's really neat to see for me, we can't be out there every time the lagoon breaches, and we don't really know how quickly the lagoon side or the outlet side, the lake side, what really happens during a rain event. So here's a rain event. So we'll go for the blue. This is the outlet, very stable salinity, and then the rain comes and the salinity drops, and then it's a little bit dynamic and then stabilizes for the. This is almost a month deployment. But on the lagoon side, you can see that it was a higher brackish salinity, and then the rain event came and just dropped it drastically, stayed low for a few days, and then as we had some high tide input, we're then getting a higher and more variable salinity back in the beach lagoon. Okay, here's another example. This one, I also wanted to point out that the salinity is, again, dropping in the lagoon. The lakeside is so much bigger that it just changes a lot more slowly. So salinity is dropping in the lagoon as I think it's getting seepage from the lake. And then we're getting just tidal. I don't think any of this dropping was from rain. It's so gradual. But then all of a sudden we get this tide coming in, and then it's over the course of a week, it then becomes really high tide really high salinity for a while. So this is really important for George and the restoration of the bird refuge to understand what kind of dynamics we have on either side of that weir. You can see the weir that separates the lakeside from the lagoon side is creating really different salinity regimes. And then after we create the connection with the project, we'll see what kind of differences, what kind of dynamic conditions we see on the upstream side of that weir. I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, and then the last one is just to point out the differences in dissolved oxygen between this lower right panel, between the lagoon side and the lake side. And this is a 3-week deployment where dissolved oxygen was always always under 3 milligrams per liter for the entire time on the lakeside. And there are very few aquatic organisms that can survive that, except for lots of bacteria can, of course. And on the lagoon side, we've got just a much higher dissolved oxygen, and even at night, it's not dropping to 0. So that's it for the bird refuge results. We have so much more data, and that'll be in our reports, but I won't bore you with too many of the graphs. Okay, and then really briefly on some of our Laguna Channel storm monitoring. So this was a storm that was in late January, and we sampled at Chase Palm Park, and this top graph shows the accumulated rain during the storm. So started off with 0, so it's inches on the y-axis and dates on the x-axis, and I apologize, I had to use a different format for date, but this is January 26th is the first date. And so this shows where we collected the samples. So really before it rained, during the first pulse, after almost an inch and a quarter of rain had fallen, and then 3 inches all at the tail end. Like the Laguna Channel was really rushing through when we collected sample number 4. It had just stopped raining, but the channel was still moving quickly. And then we sampled for a couple days after the storm when no rain had fallen. And we don't have a gauge in Laguna Channel. That one's a tough one to gauge, actually. So this is just to compare the flow in Mission Creek at the same time. And so you can see we really sampled when there was no flow, no recordable flow. The very beginning of the rain, very little flow. After the flow had come through, and then after the biggest pulse of rain, and it was still, that's still a decent flow in Mission Creek where sample 4 was collected, and then back to almost no flow for the last 2 samples. We sampled for a suite of personal care and pharmaceutical products, and we also did pesticides, but we were used to finding those in creeks, so that wasn't a surprise, but was really surprised to find caffeine, artificial sweeteners, insect repellents, prescription over-the-counter medicines, and some fragrances in every sample. And I'd say I'm most surprised about sample number 4, because that should have been really diluted. And so it means we're still seeing an input during that during a high flow period. And so that does warrant further investigation. And that's why we're going to spend a lot of our effort in the coming year, coming up with a sampling plan, seeing what the latest is on literature and white papers. There's some great work coming out of the San Diego River, and then make our sampling plan and collect some samples, and we'll let you know what we find. So our next steps are to continue all of our required monitoring, as I discussed, develop our sampling plan for the Laguna watershed, develop our purchase plan, research all the equipment. We're also, as you know, hiring someone to fill Chris's position. So we'll be working with that person closely to train them on our sampling, and then come back to you in December and update you with everything that we've done so far, and present the water quality report from FY21. So I'd like to wrap up with, of course, taking questions, and also remind you that this is we're requesting your recommendation to approve this monitoring plan, which is basically the staff report for this year.
Jill, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That is both impressive and ambitious, and yet your and the division's history of success in this research agenda and in your monitoring work. There's no doubt that you'll be successful with these 3 areas of focus, your monitoring, the Laguna watershed, and then the automated equipment, which is extraordinary. I'll turn to our committee members and see if there are any questions. If so, if you could unmute and ask your question and put your video on. don't think I'm hearing or seeing anyone. I just, on behalf of the committee, wish to commend you for focusing our attention on that Laguna watershed material or what you're finding through that monitoring. And I think all of us remember that rain event. It was probably the only rain event we've had in 2021, but that is distressing. And so thank you for prioritizing that as well. Very impressive what that automated equipment will do in terms of capturing what I suspect you might have been able to predict, but nonetheless, to get that hard data will really inform your work. So thank you so much. And hearing no questions, I will then take a motion whereby the committee concurs with the staff recommendation to implement the proposed research and monitoring plan for fiscal year 22. So is there a motion to that effect?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Sophia. Is there a second?
Happy to do that. I'll second that.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion amongst the committee or for Jill?
Thank you, Jill. This was great. And I agree with Lori. It was really great to see the Laguna area.
Okay, thank you, committee Chair Gaskin. And I think that was trying to help. It's hard to see who is talking because I can't see your cameras.
We do need to take the vote on the action.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, so we have Ms. Gaskin,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Ms. Owens,
Aye.
and Ms. Silva.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously. And again, you have our both commendation for the rigorousness of the agenda, as well as we're impressed with the capacity that you have to gather all this really important information. So thank you very much, Jill. And that concludes our meeting. We will, unless I hear anything else, we will adjourn. And for Georgia's sake, we very much look forward to getting out in the field again and seeing some of those areas that you mentioned earlier on in your comments. So thank you. So we are adjourned then. Thank you all.
Thank you. Oh, God.
Thank you. Thank you.